One, two, three.
Hello and welcome to another video from the only source of information that you need to not only survive the current apocalypse, but actually enjoy it. And today is going to be another of my regular blogs, but this one's going to be a little special because it's actually part 10 of the Melchizedek video series. That's what you're going to get today, unrefined, unscripted, because I had originally laid this whole thing out as a 4-part series or 5-part series, and then I decided to add a 6th part, which was it was going to be the Book of the Angels or something like that, or Who Are the Angels. And as this thing has grown and grown and grown, it's ended up taking more than a year. I didn't get it produced when I promised I would get it produced. Now it's written. All nine chapters, or all 9 videos in the series are written. The scripts are written. Basically, all I have to do is get my lawnmowers and pruners out and go out in the woods and cut the grass around them trees so it'll look nice for the videos. And then I have to shoot the video. So I kept putting off the angels part because I knew that if I did that we'd go another year. So what we're going to do, we're just going to produce the 9 parts of the video series called Melchizedek. And the 10th part will just have to come out next year. But right now, I'm going to go ahead and give it to you. When I do my research, I think a lot of people are really impressed with the things that I discover. But the more research you do, the more you're apt to find things, because you'll see a word in Hebrew or Greek and you recognize it, but you don't remember from where. And I've come up with resources that allow me to find where I saw those words before. And so here's how I do my thing, just so you know. I'll look at a word that's in a verse that I don't think is right, because some verses just sound silly, and some verses in the Bible actually conflict with other verses in the Bible. And that's something that's always bothered me, because I want to believe that there's something greater than myself. I want to believe in God. And I want to believe that God follows a logical reasoning, that it makes sense. And so when I find a verse that's out of place and it doesn't make sense, what I'll do is I'll look at the words in that verse. And there's ways to do that online, where you just type in the one word and it will give you every single place where that one word shows up in the Bible. And I'm not talking about the English word. I'm talking about the Greek or Hebrew word. So you put this Hebrew word in and you look to see if that word may be mistranslated. So just as an example, not a real example, but just so you understand what I'm talking about, you have a word that means tree. And so you type that word in and you just look at every verse where the word appears. And you'll find it, like the first verse is tree, next one's tree, lobster. Okay, I know that a tree and a lobster are not the same thing. Why would anybody think this word can also mean lobster if it's the exact same word, same spelling and everything? So what I'll do is I'll take the word tree and put it in that verse to see if it makes sense. And if it doesn't, I'll take the word lobster and put it in all the other places, because I'm just trying to break this code to figure out which word is the actual definition, because if the translators determined thousands of years ago that this word can mean tree or lobster, I have just as much right to go through and figure out if it means tree or lobster or something else. So if it doesn't make sense at any of those places, by the time I get to that point, I'll start to have a pattern forming in my head, and I'll go, this sounds a lot like rabbit. And I'll put that in every verse, and that one would work. But that's not the way it always goes. Sometimes you find that the majority text is correct and that the minority is mistranslated, or vice versa. It's kind of rare that you find words that none of the words that the churches say are correct. It's usually something they say is correct. Now here's why that's important today, because the Bible's, the Old Testament and the New Testament don't really exist. It's the Bible. You've got what is it, 44 books or 40 books, and or 40 authors and 60 books, something like that. But they're all just separate books. The only distinction is the languages of the text that we have in existence. So we've got all these Hebrew books and we've got all these Greek books, and by tradition we call the ones that are in Greek, we call them the New Testament, and the ones that are in Hebrew we call them the Old Testament. People believe the Old Testament was written for the Jews, the New Testament was written for Christians. It's really just a bunch of books written for mankind. And so then you start to have a little bit of a problem, because you've got words in the Old Testament that do not correspond to words in the New Testament. And so you have to go back and see. This is what I do, and I think it's logical, is I'll read a verse that says it uses the word spirit, and I'll go, wait a second, I've seen that verse before, word for word in the Old Testament, because a lot of times Jesus and the apostles would quote the Old Testament. And so if they're quoting the Old Testament in Greek, you can go back and look at that Greek quote and compare it to the verse they were quoting and compare the words. And so you can find out, and look, I'm going to look at my screen now because I don't have all this stuff memorized, and even the ones I do, I get wrong. Okay, like the word spirit in Hebrew is ruach. So if we look in the New Testament, the word spirit is pneuma. And I know that pneuma and ruach are the same word because there are words that quote the Old Testament that use this word in the place of ruach. Okay, another one is soul. And the word soul is nephesh in Hebrew, and it's psyche in Greek. Another word is angel. This is a big one because the word angel, it does not mean the same thing in Hebrew as it does in Greek. At least that's what we're told. We're told that an angel is a messenger. The word means messenger in Hebrew, and it means messenger in Greek. And the reason that I know that the Greek angel and the Hebrew angel are the same word is that a couple of the angels that are spoken of by name are mentioned in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. So we know Michael was an angel. We know that Gabriel was an angel, and both of these angels make appearances in the Old Testament. So we know that the word angel, which is melech or malak, is the same as our Greek word angelos. Now the reason this is important is because sometimes wicked spirits seem to have a personality, and sometimes they don't. Humans have a personality, but the word spirit and the word soul can't possibly mean the same thing. They're completely different. But everywhere that they use the word spirit, they sometimes put in their wind. And so the idea is that a spirit is an invisible force, maybe not necessarily a force that is an entity. In other words, it could be something that's doesn't have a personality, but it still gives us life. Like when Adam was created, it said God put his breath of life in him. What it actually says, he put his spirit into him, and he became a living soul. Now, souls are not unique to humans. In the creation account, it talks about God making the souls, the birds' souls, and making the beast of the field souls, and making the fish souls. And so a soul is just an individual. Seemingly, it is the body and spirit together, maybe just the body, or maybe it's the part of the spirit that's unique. So it's a unique living individual, could be a soul. But with angels, the words that we're told mean messenger don't really seem to mean messenger. An apostle is a messenger. That means envoy. That's actually a Latin word, means envoy. And so for some reason, the churches have put that in there because all the Bibles that we have are not translated from the original languages. They're translated from the church, the literature of the church. So angels, or apostles rather, it is a word that appears in the Latin Vulgate, which is evidence that every English Bible we have is basically a translation of the Latin Vulgate of the languages as they claim. The only reason they make the claim that the Bible, like the King James Version, is from the original languages is because it's the original language of the church. It's not the original language of the Bible. So this is what I'm about to tell you is going to be kind of shocking, and I haven't really worked out exactly how I'm going to word this when I make the official scripted video. But seemingly, the word angel, the melech, is only different by one letter from the word king, melech. So malak and melech are the same exact word. Melech means king. Malak means angel. I honestly believe that the difference is that one is a king chosen by man, and one is a king chosen by God. So these original sons of God, and this is another thing, I guess, in case somebody comes upon this video that's not used to my channel or doesn't know anything I've taught before. Adam, when he was created, he was called the Son of God. He's called the Son of God in the New Testament in the part where it's saying, you know, Jesus was the son, as people thought of Joseph. Joseph was the son of Heli, and all the way back to Adam, who was the Son of God. So we call Adam a son of God. We also call Jesus a son of God. But there were a group of people in the ancient past called the sons of God, and people think that those sons of God are angels, and it actually kind of makes sense that they are. Linguistically, it seems as if those sons of God could have been angels, but the only sons of God mentioned in the Bible are fleshly beings, Adam and Jesus. Now, Adam is never called a son of man because Adam wasn't created by a biological process. He was created directly by God. Jesus is called the Son of God, but he's also called Son of Man, which makes him unique because he was created by God, but born of a female human. So if we go back and look at the verses about these sons of God, plural, they really were, you know, multiple or plural words. So when it says sons of God, that's not a typo. That's for real. And so that we get this idea from churches that these sons of God are angels and that they helped create the earth. And the reason we say that, most churches are aware of the fact that the verse that's Genesis 1:1 says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. It says Elohim. Elohim is the plural form of the word God. It says, so what it really says is in the beginning, the gods, plural, created the heavens and the earth. And so each creative day, something else is made. You know, one day is light, one day is birds, one day is fish. The last day is man, humanity. And it says, and then the God said, let us make man in our image. So those humans that were first created were somehow unique from every other thing that was created up until that time, and that they were made in the image of God. So we've got these sons of God who were in the Garden of Eden, multiple sons of God, and we've got a commandment that was given to mankind. And that commandment says, honor your father with you, and you may live a long time on the earth. Now, I want you to think about what that means. If we honor our father and our mother, that's the hierarchy, because the word honor means the honor you give to a king. You know, that's a command. Don't give the honor that's due to your parents to people who are not your parents. So all political rulers are getting honor that they don't deserve. According to God's law, you don't give honor, that king's honor, to these false kings. That's why there's a difference between the word malak and the word melech. Melech is a human fleshly king chosen through political processes or whatever. Malak is the kings that are chosen by God. If we're told to honor our fathers and our mothers, if Adam is called a son of God, If other people in the Garden of Eden are called sons of God, those sons of God would be God's chosen kings, because by virtue of the fact that they're our parents, they have the right to rule over us. You know, you father, your grandfather, great grandfather, you all the way back, you're going to eventually end up at these sons of God. You know, we're told that Adam was a son of God. The churches say he was the first man. He was the only man. Every human on earth came from that man. The reality is there were multiple sons of God in the Garden of Eden. Probably all of them are our parents. That's why we have white people, black people, Asian people. You know, if you had the same exact two people forever, every single person born would be identical. And I really believe that they were identical in some way. There was something that people could see in them, because, you know, Adam was created, and then God created Eve out of one of his ribs. It's only logical to conclude that the other sons of God were created, and that these women were created for them out of one of their ribs. So when it says in the Bible that the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were beautiful, and they took all that they wanted as wives, what it's really saying is that sons of God, not daughters of men, but women created out of men, is how it really translates. Those people, when they bred with one another, when they had children, those would have been purebloods. When Adam and Eve had a child together, that child would have been identical to Adam and Eve in every way. You know, I mean, I'm not a believer in any religion, and science is nothing more than a religion, but some things that science teaches seem to be real. Now, if we look at all these people that descended from Adam and Eve, seemingly they were all brothers and sisters, because even though details are not given to us in most instances, when details are given, it's sisters, brothers and sisters. When Abraham went out into the promised land and the angels came to him and said, you know, you're going to have a child and it's going to rule over everything. And he said, no, that's not possible, because my sister hasn't had any babies. And so Abraham had already had babies, or had a baby, by a woman named Hagar, who was an Egyptian. She was not one of his sisters. She was a completely different person. And that baby was, I can't remember his name. But anyways, he was not a pureblood. And so that's what Abraham was saying. You know, my child can't be a king because he's not a pureblood. So I said, well, next year, you know, you'll be 100 years old, you'll have a baby. And he did. So that baby was Isaac. When it was time for Isaac to have a wife, Abraham sent a servant back to his hometown, to his father and his mother and Sarah's father and Sarah's mother, and got a wife from them, because he wanted to make sure that Isaac's children were purebloods. And sure enough, they were. His first child, or his only child that I know of, is Jacob. Jacob was a pureblood. It says that Isaac and Rebekah were very upset when Jacob chose to have children by women who were not his sisters. And so that was the end of the pure bloodline. That's where the 12 tribes of Israel come from, these non-pure bloods. Now, like I said, if we go back to when Abraham was on earth, it says that Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed. Well, before they were destroyed, angels came to visit with Abraham. And they did a lot of things. They talked, and then they went off and destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. But one of the things they did was they ate food. They sat there and ate. Abraham had this big feast prepared for him. So angels have the ability to eat food. Later on, you know, when Jesus was resurrected from the dead, he had the ability to eat food, but he also had the ability to let people put their arms into his side, and, you know, he could walk on water and cure dead people, and he could just appear out of nowhere, and he could people wouldn't recognize who he was until he taught them, and they realized his teachings were the same teachings as Jesus. But these people, the purebloods, seemingly were the angels. That word angel actually means king. You know, the only only letter in that word that's any different from the word king, you know, Malak has an alpha in it. You know, alpha means first. So Melech means king. Malak means first kings. These are the first kings. These are the sons of God that were created. Well, Abraham lived after the flood, so he's like, how do these purebloods make it from before the flood to after the flood? And the reality is that Noah and his wife's sons were all purebloods. Shem, Ham, and Japheth were all purebloods. I believe, and I don't think there's anything that contradicts what I'm saying, and there's a lot that supports what I'm saying, is that when Abraham met with those angels, he was meeting with Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So they were sons of God because they were purebloods, just like Abraham was. And they weren't the sons of God that were created by God. They were simply like duplicates. They were the ones that were purebloods that looked just like Adam and Eve, or looked like the other sons of God and daughters of men that existed in the Garden of Eden. Now, if you read stories about souls and spirits, seemingly, seemingly, all of these souls and spirits went to different places. The Bible literally says that those who are not purebloods go to Sheol or Hades. In most Bibles, Sheol and Hades are translated as hell. But that's not what those words mean. Sheol means realm of the dead in Hebrew. Hades means realm of the dead in Greek. Any verses or any books about Hades from Greek literature, it's always the realm of the dead. It's not the realm of everlasting fire or any. However, in Greek, they have another place for gods. In other words, when humans die, they go one place. When gods die, they go to another place. And so, somewhere in the New Testament, in the book of Jude, actually, first, the only chapter of Jude, it says God did not hold back from punishing the angels, but sent them to Tartarus to be in pits of dense darkness. Tartarus is the Greek word that means realm of dead gods. And I really believe that these purebloods are the gods that were worshipped in the ancient past, like Osiris, Hercules, all of the Jupiter, Saturn, all of these gods were likely the original sons of God who became the angels. Because if you read any of the stories from mythology about the gods, you always have the god of the forge. So the one who became the father of all those who work the forge. Well, if you look in the Old Testament, Genesis account says that such and such person became the god of the forge. I think that was actually Tubal-Cain became the god of the forge, or the father of all who work the forge. And then there's someone else who's the father of those who play the flute, and there's the father of those who engage in agriculture. And if you look at the mythologies of different cultures, they always have a god of the forge, a god of agriculture, a god of the flute. So there's a connection. All of these ancient purebloods, when they were alive, they were different somehow than the mixed breed people, the ones that God intended. God intended for us to come about. The only time that people like us didn't come about is when the sons of God bred with their duplicate, their female duplicates. Anytime they bred with someone else, they just made a person. But when they had sexual relations with their own twin, they created these very powerful, brilliant people. So that's what Melchizedek Part 10 is going to be, but that'll probably be next year sometime.
Boy, oh boy, there's a lot
Boy,
to
oh
go
boy,
through.
there's a lot to go through.
I guess my first
I guess my
question,
first question:
when is the
when
videos
is
going to come
the
about for
video going to come
Melchizedek?
about for Melchizedek?
Well, I've been planning on doing it from 1st to October 28th. Like post one, 3 days later, post another, 3 days later, post another, 3 days. And that'll give us 28 days of Melchizedek, every 3 days.
Yeah, so let's go through some of the questions
Yeah,
I've
so
developed
let's go.
here. First of all, I'm not sure. Do you have the? Oh no, I guess everything's fine. It sounded like there was an echo on there, but we're good. We're good. Never mind. Um, the first thing that seems to come up to me with everything you said, but kind of going back to the beginning of what you were describing, is this idea of souls and spirits and what the difference is, and what are your thoughts about animals having souls, or can an animal be a pure blood, or what was the beginning of animals as compared to humans? Let's say, I mean, are humans animals, or how does that all fit together with animals?
Well, it's like the Bible doesn't specify that on the sixth day God created white people. 1 second later, He created Asian people. 1 second later, He created black people. And it doesn't say anything about how the animals were created. Like on day three, He created Doberman pinchers, and then the second later, created German shepherds. But it does say, and I think this is in Romans, or no, First Corinthians, I think. It says every kind of flesh has a different kind of glory, just as stars have a different glory from one to the other. Different types of creatures have a different kind of glory, and so there's really every single thing that's alive had to have a spirit put into it, and every single thing that's alive was called a soul. But there aren't any details. Like in a Bible, we all come back as who we are. So when you die, you don't just kind of dissolve into the ether, and then different bits and pieces of you end up in another human. And in fact, I really believe that that's probably the difference between the wicked spirit and the good spirit. If you look at all the stories of the spirits, they're always holy or wicked. But the word holy has two different meanings. It means clean, in other words, pure spirit, and separate. The words that are used to describe the Holy Spirit are clean and separate. So if it's clean, like anything, no dirt. If it's separate, it could be the same thing. No dirt, nothing to dirty it up. But we're talking about a spirit. We're not talking about like shoes or whatever. We're talking about something that's just an invisible force. So the only thing that could really dirty that is another invisible force. And I don't know what that is. It could be, like when Adam and Eve were on earth, Eve's spirit became dirty, not because Satan injected her with some kind of spirit energy. We're not told that. Maybe that's what he did, but really, the only thing that we're told that he did is he just messed with her thinking. He manipulated her. He approached her as a friend, and he said, "Wow, a lot of trees in here, yeah. But I hear God doesn't let you eat from trees." "Oh no, He lets us eat from trees." "Really? I heard you can't eat from trees." "No, we can eat from the trees that are good for humans. We're not allowed to eat from this tree over here, these trees over here." Satan said, "Oh no, that's okay. You should do that because you'll be like a god. If God tells you you can't eat from those trees and you eat from those trees anyway, it's like you are a god." He said, "Well, yeah, we're going to die though." "No, you'll never die. You're not going to die. That's a lie." So all he did was fill her mind with propaganda, and he didn't force himself on her and put something in her through some miraculous process. He just got her thinking in a wicked way. So that may be all it is. That may be what's polluting our spirit. But at the same time, when you have all of these demons, the demons actually seemingly have personalities. When Jesus talked to one of them, and it's like, What's your name?" "Well, my name is Legion because there's a bunch of us." And he said, "Well, I'm going to cast you out." "Well, if you're going to cast us out into these pigs." So going back to your question about animals, do animals have souls or spirits? If we look at everything on Earth, maybe not, but we know for a fact that humans and pigs can have the same spirit. So maybe they also have souls. I really I don't know that every animal is going to come back with its own intact personality. Maybe it doesn't work that way. Humans do.
Speaking about Legion and going into the pigs, so it's kind of interesting that Legion, or whatever that guy's name was, he had lots of spirits, but the pigs had no spirits, and presumably we have good spirits, and so it's like, there's empty vessels around us all around, I guess, right?
Yeah, because well, there's one of the things that when Jesus talked about people, he always spoke of them like they were pots or cups. And he used specific words, like when he was talking to the Pharisees and they were saying, why don't your disciples wash their hands like they're supposed to? And Jesus said, well, when you wash the bowl, it's not important. How clean the outside of the bowl isn't important. It's what's on the inside of the bowl. Well, he used two words there, and they aren't they're unique words. They're the vessels that he used. Like if you're reading the Bible, it says something like a vessel or a bowl or a pitcher or something like that. But it's two words that mean like a cup that you would put a condiment in, or a plate that you would have breath mints on. So these people that he's called empty vessels, it was a specific kind of vessel. It's a kind of vessel that wouldn't have anything nutritious. So it's like he called them ketchup bowls and mint trays. And so the spiritual feeding that people were getting from these religious leaders were nutritionally empty, just empty calories.
Do you think so? If the pigs were empty of a spirit of their own, or maybe Legion went into the vessel with an animal spirit or whatever in there. I mean, how do is there humans walking around? Have you ever met a human that didn't have a spirit?
I don't know exactly. I think if you have a dirty spirit, it's the same thing as having no spirit, really, because if you look at people, they seem to be mindlessly going about their days. They there's well, their value to themselves is based on their value to civilization. So, what is their job? You ask somebody, who are you as a person? They'll say, I'm a carpenter, or I'm a mechanic. And there's really nothing else to them. They'll tell you what their credit score is. They'll tell you about what colleges their kids are in, but they never tell you, well, I love people, I love you, and I look forward to everlasting paradise. They never talk about that. They're always like, I'm a mechanic, and they just seem, they put so much emphasis on that stuff that they're not even consciously aware of the damage they're doing to their fellow man or their surroundings, or what. Because you take somebody that seems like a decent human being and give them a job at a car lot, and they'll send them to class, and they say, okay, whenever you get somebody in here, you pretend like you're their friend, and you get them to sign papers that mess up their life. And they're like, okay. They don't even think about it. They don't walk off and say, I don't want this job. I shall go be a slave and dig ditches, do something beneficial. They don't even contemplate that. All my life, I've been offered jobs that were just rip-off jobs. And I'm like, I'm not doing this. And so I ended up being a slave. I think I made, one time I figured it all up. Every hour I've ever worked in my life, I worked for 30 years. And like I always made minimum wage, never made more than that. And I always was asked to come in and work on my days off and not clock in. So I was making minimum wage for 40 hours, and then I was working 20 hours without getting paid. So I ended up making about $1.88 an hour for 30 years because I wouldn't compromise on, being evil. That doesn't mean that everybody who is a mechanic is evil, because mechanics can make good money. Apparently, this just wasn't in the cards for me.
I've said this before about you is that you seem to attract evil people around you, and it's interesting that you of all people shouldn't have been able to detect evil spirits. I mean, is there a way that we can tell a spirit is evil or good in somebody?
It's very rare. I've actually, and even then I don't know, but I've had people just walk up to me and you see them, and then they start shaking, and I had a guy one time come in. I was at the Social Security office, I think, and filling out paperwork. This guy walked in, and when he walked past me, he just instantly focused on me. He got up to the desk, and they were talking to him. He just kept staring at me, and he reached up and he started ripping out tufts of hair and throwing it at me. Like, yeah, that guy's demon possessed. But at the same time, when Jesus came across that demon possessed guy, when it was over with, they were buddies. It's not like the guy was bad. He just filled with some kind of a wicked entity that was messing with his head. But other times, I just see, because they don't just throw their hair at you. Some wicked people, really wicked people, will just say, "Hey, man, I really like you, and could we be friends? And here, let me shower you with gifts and do." And then the next thing you know, everything you own is gone. They've stripped you. And it's. I hate having my material possessions taken from me because I had to work so many hours for so many years just to have a little bit of nothing. The best money I ever made in my life was like what I get on food stamps. Since so when people strip me of my possessions, that hurts because I know that it's like somebody that takes something from me that's $1,000 that represents about 500 hours of my labor at some point. And so you talk about slavery, that's slavery. But what really hurts is I get so excited when I get a friend. Like when I started talking to you, I've never told you this, but it just made me feel so good to find somebody that I thought loved me, really was concerned about my well-being. And same thing with a bunch of people. Carlos affects me the same way, and Shannon. There's a bunch of them out there. I don't want to keep naming them because I'll forget somebody, and somebody will get their feelings hurt. But when uh, when I meet people like that, probably the worst thing that can happen to me is find out they weren't really my friend. Kind of that hurts me more than the loss of money. Because if somebody breaks into my house, that's going to hurt me. But if somebody pretends like they're my friend to take the same stuff that the thief would take when he breaks into my house, that hurts a lot.
Yeah, I wonder if these people are become stumbling blocks to you. Like, were they placed in your pathway? Like, I think Jesus said something like, "Get out of my way, you're a stumbling block," or something like that. Do you feel that that happens to you?
Well, in all honesty, it's like I've made several video series that are like groundbreaking, monumental, otherworldly things that are go completely against what the traditional religions say. And so every time I do one of those, it seems like I get dozens of people attacking me in one way or the other. Breaking into my house or lying to me to get money out of me, or making me jump through hoops to get paperwork done, or stuff that just okay. I'm gonna sit down now and I'm gonna start typing, and it. And the next thing you know, the phone rings and it's somebody messing with me again. And so it's a stumbling block in some ways. But like recently, I've had to go through the same thing. And every day I would just, you start walking around talking to yourself because you start losing your mind over it. And I would come in here and sit down and type on the Melchizedek script. And I was able to keep my head straight long enough to do that, regardless of what's going on in my personal life. Especially now, it seems to me that there was a time when I believed that big things were going to happen, but not in my lifetime. The end of civilization would eventually come, but I wouldn't, not in my lifetime, mostly because everybody I knew had that feeling. It's going to happen someday, but not in my lifetime. Then, about the time I turned 40, I did the All Seeing Eye series, and I thought, like once it was out there and the police didn't come put me in jail or kill me, I thought, this is going to happen in my lifetime. I'm going to see this with my own eyes. And then, the September 11th attacks and all the weird stuff that's going on, the war against terror, the war against drugs, and now the latest thing is the global thing. We're not going to mention that word because I don't want my ads taken off here. But yeah, now I'm like, wow, it's not only going to happen in my lifetime, it's going to happen on Thursday. So like, I don't have time to mess around. I've got to get this Melchizedek script done because the time is running out. I can't be playing. I've got to. And the same thing with all these other projects I got. In the past, I was planting fruit trees and I was pruning my trees, and I put a lot of effort into that. Now, I don't do nothing with any of that.
Yeah, and these people, they don't seem to come with a rhyme or reason to them, do they? I mean, it's almost like they could be family, they could be close friends, they could be a politician. I mean, you just never seem to know who is good and who is evil because it could be everybody.
Well, do you have any of those kinds of experiences where people will just go out of their way to attack you and make trouble for you, and you don't even know what you did to them, and but they somehow are just fixated on doing you harm.
I mean, personally, yes and no. I mean, mostly no, because I have a philosophy of not interacting. I only want to surround myself with good people. So generally, I don't talk to very many people, and I kind of keep to myself. Whereas you seem more outgoing. I mean, you'll talk to people in the marketplace. I mean, some stranger will come up to you that maybe is a viewer, a subscriber, and they'll talk to you, and you'll just open up. Whereas I keep my head down and I don't talk to people. So personally, I don't think it happens that much. But yeah, it's difficult to have people that you can trust. And yeah, like you've said, I mean, I know I can trust you. Out of all your videos over the past decade, you haven't said one thing that would make me distrust you. Whereas basically all just about everybody else has said something that makes me question them. But yeah, so I mean, I guess I wonder if there's a way that we can tell, like, oh, this person we can trust or this person we can't, you know.
There's a verse that appears in the book of Hosea, I think. It might be Amos, but I think it's Hosea. It says in the last days, the final days, um, your young men will see visions, your old men will dream dreams, and your women will prophesy. I think basically old men, young men, and women will have dreams, see visions, and prophesy. I don't think it's going to be like unique to each one, but that verse gets quoted in the book of Acts and it's quoted the same way. So there may be some, like men and women are different, young people and old people are different. So there may be a higher propensity for one, a prophecy amongst women as opposed to men. And it may be also because we've got this 6,000 year history of men prophesying, so it's just bringing out the fact that women prophesy too. But when that happens, I mean, I don't even know what visions and dreams and prophesying are like. I mean, I think the thing that I'm doing fulfills all those roles, but I think it's going to be unique in a different way because it doesn't say that sustenance and covering will be doing these things. It sounds like everybody who belongs to Jesus, everybody who has a clean spirit will suddenly have these miraculous ability to do these things. And I think when that happens, I mean, right now we have to take roll with the punches. It's just going to come, and they're quite treacherous. They always want to pretend they're your friend, and I think a lot of that's because they know that they're in the majority, and people like us don't have too many friends, and so we crave that. But I really believe that once we get those ability to do those things, which seemingly are miraculous abilities, that we'll just know automatically. Somebody will come up and say, "Hey, man, how you been doing?" And you say, "Away from me, Satan! I dreamed about you last night. I knew this was coming."
In that regard, I've always thought of ancient Israel as a place like a refuge for like-minded people to come together. So it was more of like an island among a sea of evil people. So all the good people come together in one place. I wonder if that'll be, well, I guess maybe the entire world will be good at that point, or maybe it'll just go back to there's a small spot of Israel where people come together that are good.
Well, even within Israel, all the prophets were killed. It's like Israel, the killer of the prophets. That's what Jesus called them. So apparently, all of Israel, it's not just made up of good people. Somebody was doing the killing of the prophets, and there was even a verse that said that 5,000 of the prophets were uh, put into caves, and Elijah would supply them with food and water and the things they needed to live because they were in hiding from one of the evil kings of Israel. So it's like Israel may have been intended as an island amongst the wicked at least when they went in. God cleaned it all up, brought them in there, and provided them with everything they needed, gave them food, gave them fruit trees, and it's like it was only a very short time later that Israel, Israel was originally was called the land of milk and honey, or the paradise of God, but it was shortly after that it was called Zion. You know, that's where we get the word Zionism, Zion. And Israel is called Zion to this day. Zion means burnt place, because once the Israelites got in there, they completely destroyed it.
Well, there's some things I want to move on to with about pureblood, but before we do that, slightly going back to the animal thing, have you ever heard about? Well, I'm sure you have, where they like native cultures talk about spirit animals. How does that factor into this whole spirit thing?
Not really sure. I think it's real, but I don't know. I don't know how. You know, there's verses like Satan is called a serpent. So I've always wondered, you know, was that could be like a dinosaur or something. He approached Eve, and you know, it was before the Tower of Babel incident, so humans probably could communicate with animals. So the serpent approached Eve and said, you know, is it true? And and it may also be that Satan was a human, but the serpent was his spirit animal. That's only two options I think of. You know, like when I was a Jehovah's Witness, they used to say that it was an actual serpent, you know, because you can't get around the fact that that's what it says in the book of Genesis is a serpent. But it says they say that Satan used like a, you know, a puppet, you know, used through his voice or whatever, or somehow caused the snake to speak. It wasn't really the snake speaking. And the same thing with Balaam's ass. You know, he's walking along, he's going off to do some dirty work. He's a prophet, so he has the ability to see the future and to curse people and bless people, and his ass jumps in front of him and tries to stop him, and so he starts beating him. And he's like, "Why are you doing this? Have I ever misled you before? You know, I've always been a good pack animal for you. I've never done you wrong. Why are you hitting me?" And it was nothing said about that. He didn't go, "Wow, my donkey is talking. This is mind blowing." He apparently had always had this ability to talk to his donkey, or at least it didn't surprise him that his donkey was speaking. So, what is a spirit animal? I'm not really sure. We'll find out one day, maybe.
Now, going to this issue of the purebloods idea, so when you say pureblood, is it the fleshly vessel, or is the pureness in the spirit somehow? Or how does that factor in this whole pureblood spirit thing?
I don't really know. I know that it was odd that they have these sons of God and these daughters of men, and Adam chose to reproduce at least some offspring through Eve. You know, so he had Cain, who turned out to be evil, but then they had Abel. Abel and Cain were both children of Adam and Eve, but Adam, you know, Abel got killed. So Seth comes along. He was the third male child of Adam and Eve. And when Eve named him, you know, Seth means set. That's like the god Set of Egypt. Set means set in place. And you'd think, well, who's he set in place of? You know, because Adam was his father, so he could be set in place of Adam. Like they understood that Adam would eventually die and they would need someone to take his place. But Abel had just been killed earlier than, you know, and so maybe she was saying that he was set in place of Abel. So Abel was special. He was killed. And in fact, she mentioned Abel. So, oh, yeah, he's set. He's a replacement for Abel. So those people, well, like I say, you know, from a distance, the angels were going to Abraham, and Abraham, from a distance, said, "Oh, it's the angel of God." He knew that they were different somehow. Now he would have been familiar with um, the sons of Noah, which were Seth, Ham, and Japheth. So maybe that's all. He saw Seth, Ham, and Japheth coming, and he recognized them. But it may be that they were tall. You know, there's a lot of stories of giants. So here these guys are coming. Maybe they're like 8 feet tall or something. Maybe they look like aliens. You know, big old giant head. You know, when they started reproducing it, we're not given enough details to know anything. I mean, we can scan the Bible all we want, and there's not a lot of detail, but if you go out in the yard and dig up a Neanderthal man, it somehow to somebody looks different than regular men. I don't know how, but they've also got these things that they dig up every now and then that have gigantic heads or long, elongated heads. Maybe those were the original sons of God. Who knows?
Now, speaking of all this, it just rings a bell to me that this is all like Nephilim speak. I mean, what's the difference between talking about Nephilim and pureblood?
There's people that believe that Nephilims are people that cut down trees. I've seen that before. I never saw it before I came up with the word Nephil or Nephal means to fall. Nephal, fall. Nephil means to cause to fall. So these people cause something to fall. I believe that they cause people to fall because they're also called heroes. And hero, the word hero, we always think of like, wow, guys in the military, they're protecting our freedom. They're heroes. Firemen, they're heroes. Cops are heroes. In the Bible, hero is a bad thing. These are murderers. These are the people that aggressively, aggressive, selfish people. And and all the stories about the Nephilim sound like stories about soldiers. It doesn't sound like they were a pure blood or not a pure blood. It says when the daughters of men had sexual relations with the sons of God, then the Nephilim were in the earth. Well, it's possible that those sons of God were also Nephilim. It's like even though Satan is called a serpent, he could be called a Nephilim because he caused people to die. He was their hero. And in fact, all these heroes we have today, the same thing. They cause people to die. They're selfish and they're aggressive and they're ganged up, in groups. That was another thing about the Nephilim is that like when all this stuff was going on, everybody was forming up into teams. So you've got like Amraphel of Sodom and Kedorlaomer of Gomorrah and Zeboim and those guys were like gathering these groups around them to go to war. And they went to war and it's like there was maybe 10 kings at war. Abraham bailed out. He didn't even have anything to do with it. He left. But he eventually got involved because somebody kidnapped Lot, his nephew. So all he wanted was to go get Lot back. And he ended up killing 5 entire armies with his group. He had like 800 people with him probably. And they defeated this bunch. And the bunch that was left, Abraham was like, okay, everything's settled, no more war. And they said, so Abraham paid tithes to Melchizedek. The others paid to them. Now, Melchizedek was Canaan. He was the father of all of these Canaanites, and all of the kings that were named were his children, their grandchildren, great grandchildren. And so they were demanding tithes, even though, according to the law, honor your father and your mother, they should have been paying tithes to Melchizedek. But like the Bible says, you always pay the higher ranking gets paid by the lower ranking. That's how tithes work. So, what was the question again?
Well, everything you're saying though makes it sound like purebloods are evil. I mean, so is it a bad thing to be a pureblood?
I was thinking, originally I was thinking that all the problems that came upon mankind were caused by the ones that were mixed breeds. That would be like racism, like all the whites should have stayed with the whites and the blacks should have stayed with the blacks. But I don't think that was God's plan. I think maybe the pure bloods were the ones causing the problem. I don't think the pure bloods were like the Nephilim. I think the pure bloods were the kings of the Nephilim. Like I say, the angels are called Malak, the original kings, the alpha kings. So these alpha kings would have been the leaders of those, just like when, remember when the angels went into Sodom and Gomorrah, they were like, have sex with us. They, the churches present that as if they were trying to get the men, the male angels, to have sex with the male humans. It was saying, have sex with our tribe. In other words, give us babies that are powerful. Because apparently, as time went on, the purebloods didn't exist anymore because they couldn't reproduce anymore. That's why Abraham was 100 years old before he had a kid because they were losing that ability to interbreed with their sisters. And I think that the closer you could get to a pureblood in your tribe, the more powerful you would be. So I don't think the Nephilim are the purebloods, and I don't think the Nephilim are the half breeds. I think Nephilim are just killers. You know, it says in those days there were the Nephilim. You know, if you go back and just replace that with, you know, in those days there were soldiers in the earth. That's really all it is. There were soldiers in the earth. They were the great mighty men of old. They were the heroes. They were famous.
Yeah, I like your point about the Sodom when, you know, the angels came there and then the people wanted to breed with them. It's most people seem to take that as something against homosexuality, but it was really about breeding that they needed to breed, you know, pure bloods or Nephilim or something, and it had really nothing to do with homosexuality. Yeah. I mean, I think we've talked about that in the past.
Yeah, I made a video about that one time. That's Sodom and Gomorrah, something like that. But it's when you read it in English, it sounds like the men said, "Have sex with us." Well, yeah, yeah. The men surrounded the angels and said, "Have sex with us, our tribe, not with me personally, but here's my daughter. You can have sex with my daughter." And in fact, you know that's one of the reasons I think it's because they were homosexuals. Is Abraham knew that they wanted them to reproduce, or not Abraham. It was Lot. Yeah, Lot knew that they wanted him to reproduce, and he said, you know, Lot himself was from the purebred tribe, right? Because he was a nephew of Abraham, and if you go look, Lot's father and was like, you know, Abraham was his uncle, so he was from that purebred tribe. So he's like, here, have sex with my daughters and reproduce with them. You know, and they're like, man, what kind of a jerk was Lot that he would sacrifice his daughters to keep them from having sex with these, you know, angels. They must have been homosexuals. He was trying to stop them from, you know, practicing homosexuality. But they didn't want that. They knew that that wasn't going to work. They wanted these high-ranking angels for sex.
Now, am I pureblood? Are you pureblood? How do we know if somebody listening is a pureblood?
I think the last pureblood was Jacob. At his death, there were no more because he's like a focus of the entire history of humanity in his lifetime. And his father and mother, Isaac and Rebecca, really didn't like that at all. They were like, why is he out, you know, making offspring with these other races? Somehow they wanted to keep it as a pure blood, but that stuck, and it didn't just stick in Israel. If you know you look at the kings of England, they're always having sex with their sisters, their aunts, their uncles. They're just always trying to keep the bloodline pure, even though, you know, that no longer works. In fact, the results you get now are completely opposites of the results. Because you could take a pure blood person that has no DNA problems and you reproduce with your sister, you're just going to make another very, very healthy human. But if you take your sister and she's got one of them chromosomes or whatever that makes people have Down syndrome, and you've got that in you, you know, and the two people with that same gene, then all your kids are going to have Down syndrome. So, are they going to be deaf? Are there going to be something will be wrong with them? And if you go back and read the history of England, it's like all the kings were really messed up.
And do you
But it
think,
ain't just England. The French did that. The Chinese did that. If you go, you know, read the history of the Americas, the Mayans, the Incans, the Aztecs, they all tried to have children by their sisters.
now, do you think that once Jesus returns, God sets things straight, do you think it'll return to being purebloods, lineages, and all that stuff?
Well, one of the stories that, you know, in the book of Melchizedek, or the book of Hebrews, it explains why Melchizedek was the rightful king and why he was the rightful priest, even though, you know, the Jews, they had a tribe that was just priest and they had another tribe that was just the king. So if you were a king, you had to come from the tribe of Judah. If you were a priest, you had to come from the tribe of Levi. But Melchizedek was both. Okay, in the script that I did, I think it was part 3, the true identity of Melchizedek. I explained that before the flood, Noah had 3 sons: Shem, Ham, and Japheth. After the flood, he had one more son named Canaan by his daughter-in-law, not by his wife. So Shem, Ham, and Japheth were purebloods, but Canaan wasn't. And yet he was the one who was chosen to be the rightful king. Remember, the word angel or would have been those sons of God. Those were the purebloods. Those were the ones Noah and his wife made them. But the Canaan was not, because he was from the his reproduced by his daughter-in-law. Well, you think about it, that's what happened with Jesus. Remember, all the sons of God from the very beginning were created directly by God. No biological process involved, just God picked up dirt and made them. That's the way it's presented. But Jesus was different. He was a son of God and a son of man, because even though God was his father, his biological process brought him about. And so, even though it's like Noah had sexual relations, Noah reproduced with his daughter-in-law, it could be said that God reproduced Jesus with his daughter-in-law. So that's how Melchizedek and Jesus are related. Here's something else I've never talked about before, because it's like people get stuck in this trap. They say, "Oh, I'm free. I'm thinking outside of the box. I'm separating myself from Christianity," but they really don't. But in the book, the Quran, the Holy Quran of Islam, I've been raised all my life to believe that Muhammad created the Quran by reading the Bible and then writing his own version. And that always made sense to me because all the characters are the same. But these really, really intimate details, things that he could not possibly have gotten right, he got right. Like Muhammad had some kind of a spirit guiding him to write that. Now, not all of the Quran. Some of the Quran is like the book of Proverbs. It's just nonsense. It's stuff that some Jewish or some Muslim cleric wrote or something. But a large part of the Quran is a story of men like Abraham, Noah, Jesus. They're all in there. Well, if he just was copying the story of the Bible and highlighting the things he thought were important to Islam, he, when he wrote about Canaan, he wrote something different. Canaan was born before the flood and died in the flood. So the Quran says Canaan was born before the flood and died in the flood. The Bible says Canaan was born after the flood by Noah's niece, or his daughter-in-law. One of the things that Noah said that the churches have built this ridiculous doctrinal belief around is that Noah said Canaan's family lineage will be cursed. And so people are like, oh, so the Canaanites deserve to be punished because they're the offspring of the wicked Canaan. That's not what Noah was saying. Is somehow Canaan was no longer right. So he was born of Noah's wife, he died, and then he came back through reproductive process with Noah's daughter-in-law. So that's the same thing with Jesus. I said before, Jesus was born before, he lived before, and he came back. He was born and came back, and when he came back, he was half human and half God.
Okay, well, we're past an hour now, so I'm not sure if people want to hear an old man rambling on forever in a swamp.
I
So,
can't believe it'll stay hanging around for an hour.
yeah. One technical note before we go out. I just want to let everybody know that the website has the upcoming scripts, so of your YouTube videos that you're about to record. A lot of the website has like old stuff on it, but there's other resources if they want reading material or something like that. But otherwise, the scripts for your upcoming YouTube series are new. But yeah, so sustenanceandcovering.com, and other than that, why don't you go ahead and take us out?
Yeah, just and to get to that, you just go to, what does it say? Doesn't it say scripts or YouTube scripts or something like that?
Right, it'll be one of the menus, YouTube scripts. I mean, and when
And then when
people,
you get in there, you look for Melchizedek Part 1, Melchizedek Part 2, and on and on.
yep, yep, I'm
Okay.
sure they'll find it. Go ahead and take us out.
Okie doke. Well, I've revealed a lot of sacred secrets today, and without a script, I think I did pretty good, because this is the kind of stuff I don't like talking about until I have all my I's dotted, my T's crossed. But hopefully you're excited now. You're watering at the mouth for the when it all starts to come about, and hopefully by the time I do it, you'll have probably forgotten this. But everything's on schedule. We're going to get everything done. And as always, if you don't want to survive, don't listen to me.